har 24 sekunder.
Welcome to this webinar today, where we are going to touch down in the Brazilian market and get an overview of its potential and future developments. So now, why Brazil, you might wonder? Well, with the trade agreements currently in the making, the market has grown drastically in terms of importance and relevance, especially for Swedish firms. The recent Business Climate Survey from 2023, conducted by Business Sweden and Swedish Chambers International, revealed that Brazil is the market with one of the highest percentages of profitable companies and planned future investments. However, despite this, there are still some hurdles and cultural differences that might complicate an entry into Brazil. We are therefore here today to provide you with the expertise and experiences and to make this huge market more comprehensible. This webinar today is hosted at the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce and organized by a collaboration between Swedish Chambers, both regional and also international, from the Swedish Chambers International Network. Each of these trade talks provides a glimpse into a new market, a new country, and they are for both importing and exporting companies, allowing listeners to be able to evaluate an entire market without having to board a single flight. Next up, we have Trade Talks Germany, which is going to be hosted at the Norrbotten Chamber of Commerce on the 7th of December 2023. But for now, back to Brazil. My name is Louise, and I come from the Stockholm Chamber of Commerce, and I will host you throughout this webinar, consisting of 4 expert presentations, each of them with a different angle. We're going to start with the macro perspective, with a brief SWOT analysis of the Brazilian market, and then we're moving into some historical developments and some future predictions. And lastly, we're going to narrow down on some practicalities, as well as getting to hear about a Swedish player who successfully started, developed, and thrived in the Brazilian market. The session is also going to round off with a panel discussion where we're going to take up some pre-sent questions, and where also you viewers are going to be able to ask some questions in the live chats. So if you get any questions, write them in the live chats, and we're going to try and take up those questions if we have any time for that. So without further ado, I would like to welcome up on stage Andreas Rentner, who has worked for Business Sweden in Sao Paulo for more than 6 years and helped many Swedish companies reach their full potential in Brazil. The floor is yours, Andreas. You can start by introducing yourself, and then we'll try to get your slides up on the screen.
That's great. So let's just start with the sound check as well. All good, Louise?
Yes, I can hear you.
Yes. Excellent. So thank you. Thank you for the introduction. Thank you for inviting me to these trade talks about Brazil today. This together with my fellow Suecolleros here that you also will be introduced to soon, the other keynote speakers. It's a great topic to talk about. I've been living, as Louise mentioned, in Brazil since 2017. I'm the trade commissioner for Brazil, and that means that I run the Swedish Trade and Invest Council, and we are 9 people operating within the full range of different business development and consultancy services. Business Sweden is a semi-governmental organization that has the objective to grow Sweden abroad, but also to attract Brazilian investors to Sweden. So this is as importantly, of course, to build Swedish capacity in Sweden. But I think enough said about that, and let's move on. And I must admit here, Louise, that I don't see the picture. So please go to the slide with, now they're coming up, thank you, with Brazilian saying. So we go to the topic of today, and that's Brazil, not Business Sweden. So you can change, and maybe there's a delay here. But I wanted to start off a little bit on trying to capture what is Brazil, and doing that with a few Brazilian sayings, and listed 5 of them here, and I think they capture quite well what Brazil is all about. The first one, Brazil is not for beginners. It shows the complexity that comes with this huge market, and you need to be prepared. Secondly, Brazil is the country of the future, but the future never arrives. And this is often said by the Brazilians themselves. They do see that the potential also, like we do, but it's hard sometimes to really capture and operational, put the action into operational. And also you have, of course, here macro situations that geopolitical and also domestic changes that impact this. We will come back to that later. Then the third one, he who doesn't have a dog hunts with a cat. This shows the flexibility and the creativity of the Brazilians to find a solution when there is an obstacle. And finally, soft water, hard rocks, water on hard rocks. It needs time, it needs perseverance to overcome the Brazilian market. But once you're there, if you have a long-term view on it, you can and will most likely be successful. And this is something that we also have seen in the business climate survey that was recently done, that the majority of the Swedish companies that are here and have been operating here for a longer period are profitable, and more profitable than most other countries. So with that said, Brazil got it. Brazil blows it sometimes, but we really believe, I'm sure my fellow keynote speakers here, that Brazil really got it, and now we think the timing is right to act on Brazil. So next page, and I was given the task here today in this webinar to talk about the Brazil from a more macro perspective, and then we will go into some of the specifics with my fellow keynote speakers. Will cover that, but I will not really bore you with hard facts. These you can easily find yourself. What I wanted to show with this one is just put the relation to the size of the country and the region with Europe, and as you can see, it is a massive market. And with that comes, of course, complexity. Just think of all the markets in Europe and the complexity we have there. You could actually add that into Brazil. And if we move to the next slide, also a bit detailed slide, but just to show also the diversity of the country when it comes to where you have the growth, the economic power, which is mainly in the southern parts of the country. So and also the population is more spread along the country, but the economical powerhouse you find down in the south, southeast, and center west. That though, if we move to the next slide to bridge this one, is where are the opportunities and what are the characteristics of the Brazilian market when it comes to the industry. And there we see that it's actually the whole country is involved in developing the powerhouse as it is, not only in the region, but also many times on a global level, with a super strong mining industry, agriculture that is top one in, for example, export of beef, soya beans, and coffee, to mention a few. Then you have the whole forestry sector with pulp and paper, and what comes out of that today is, of course, the whole bioeconomy, but also the biodiversity and the importance of that, not only for Brazil, but also for the whole global ecosystem. Further down to the left-hand side, you also have the hydrogen plant, and this is also something I will come back to, the green profile of Brazil, and that the opportunity that the country has in terms of taking a global leading position in the green transition and really becoming the 100% green country in the world. On the right-hand side, you see the oil and gas industry, also very relevant for Brazil, and also with a lot of exports. You have the automotive and also the more tech industry in Brazil, with in this case represented by the aircraft industry, and then. In the far right picture in the middle, you have São Paulo as the economical hub for not only Brazil but for the whole region, where you find the majority of all global head offices for the region being located. And this is also where you find the Swedish majority of the Swedish companies and head offices located. This is something that my fellow keynote speaker Jonas will cover a bit later. So given this, I'd like to just quickly move on to the last slide, and that is the actual SWOT analysis that was made in order to summarize where Brazil is in a very short note. And as most of you are probably familiar with, it's a model where you look at strength and weaknesses, and then opportunities and threats. And I think I've covered most of it so far, but I really want to focus a bit extra on the strength side with abundant natural resources that this country sits on. It's so rich, and it just needs to make the transformation of becoming part of the full value chain and not only a supplier of natural resources. The large economy that attracts foreign investments, especially in these past years with the turbulence in the global geoeconomics. Powerhouses, as I mentioned, in several areas, and also not to be forgotten, a strong democratic values, and that also respect diversity, even if this is not always maybe coming out in media that way. Looking at the weaknesses then, and my Johan Fager here will cover that part, but it's all about the red tape of Brazil, also referred to the cost of Brazil, but you will hear more about this soon. Also the political instability, but that's part of the DNA in this region, to be honest. So you just need to be able to manage it in a good way and live with it. So then moving over to the opportunity side, I need to stress the opportunities that we see in the green transition and the green transformation taking place here on the energy side, but also for the full value chain. Take the mining industry, the car industry, any industries, they are all into the transformation at this moment, looking for good solutions to make it the decarbonization in practice. It's also the opportunity of the EU-Mercosur agreement that has been up for talks for 20 years, but are closing down to hopefully a final agreement. But I think we will touch upon that in the later here in the discussion. Moving lastly over to the threat side, it is talking about the green profile Brazil has. There is, of course, also a liability in that, and that is taking care of the environmental challenges that the country has and have had for at least the past 5 years with the deforestation that has been much in focus when you talk about Brazil, unfortunately. But we want to talk about the other things as well. And with the new government now in place, it's been clearly declared that they are on top of this, and they have tough targets to meet. And this is also plays into the EU-Mercosur agreement. Other threats is the incoming inequality and what that can bring in terms of disturbances in society. But as we also know, Brazil is not known to be a country with a lot of riots. Unfortunately, we have had some the past year here, but that's not the common way of communicating dissatisfaction. Finally, occasional crisis, economic turbulence. This is where we actually see that the turbulence, the global turbulence today is playing probably Brazil in their hands, because Brazil has always been able to take a more neutral stand in a global context. So with that said, I hope you got a very, very quick overview of Brazil and the challenges and opportunities, threats and weaknesses. Over to you now, Jonas, to talk a little bit more about Sweden in Brazil.
Yeah, okay. Thank you so much, Andreas. I know summarizing an entire market, let alone the biggest economy in South America, is not an easy task, especially not in 5 minutes. So big thanks. And now we would like to welcome up Jonas Lindström, who is the managing director at the Swedish Chamber of Commerce in Sao Paulo. And he works on a day-to-day basis with developing the trade relations between Sweden and Brazil. The screen is yours, Jonas.
Thank you, Louise. Thank you, Stockholm Chamber of Commerce and all Swedish regional chambers, and congrats to the initiative with the trade talks. Very happy to have Brazil here on the agenda today, the country that we love. And Andreas, congrats also to the introduction. Very good. You covered a lot already in a few minutes. And we have a challenge here in 1 hour to talk about this huge market called Brazil. And I think it's important also to talk about Team Sweden, who we are, who can assist companies coming to Brazil. Brazilians find it confusing, and even Swedes sometimes ask, what does the embassy do? What do the consulates do? Business Sweden, the chamber. So a quick glimpse of the chamber. I prepared a few slides about the chamber first, before we enter in Sweden and Brazil in general, who we have here. I don't see the first slide, but let's see if it comes up. No?
Yeah, you can continue. The slide should pop up at any moment.
Okay, no problem. So who are we, first of all? We are a member organization, non-for-profit. So the companies that are part of the members of the chamber, here they come. We are an independent non-profit member organization, as I said. We have 180 companies, and only that shows the strong presence of Sweden in Brazil. They are not only Swedish companies. We are here to join Brazilian companies also with the Swedish ecosystem. So many of these 180 companies are Brazilian companies, suppliers or clients to the Swedish industry in Brazil. Important to mention. And we've been here in Brazil for 70 years and celebrating a lot this anniversary this year. And our board is 15 people from different companies here in Brazil, large and small. We're happy to have Queen Sylvia as an honorary member of the board. Since she lived here in Sao Paulo during her teenage period, she accepted this invitation. And we are here, I'm sitting right now in our business center in the center of Sao Paulo, where we have a co-working, and this room where I'm now, where we have the presentations and the committee meetings, and where we do our core business, which is networking and competence development. So next slide, please.
Yeah, next slide is up for the viewers. You can.
I see there's a delay. So no, so we have the committees. We work a lot with 5 committees: the finance and human capital, etc. So they arrange these. We have 50 events per year for the members, where we exchange experiences of how doing business in Brazil. So we think there's a lot of knowledge and experience among the companies in Brazil. So that is one of the benefits we as Team Sweden offer. And we work a lot with Team Sweden, as you see on the slide, with the embassy, the consulates, Business Sweden, and CISP, who is in Research and Innovation Center here in Sao Paulo. So this is to show the strength for you as a company coming to Brazil or any other Swedish organization, that it's in all our interest in Team Sweden to receive you on all levels here, not only in Sao Paulo, but nationwide in Brazil, and there is this network here to support you. And as the chamber, we work a lot with SCI, Swedish Chambers International, so we have this international network with chambers all over the globe. Euro Chambers in Brazil is here in Sao Paulo. We work a lot with other European chambers. And of course, Global Compact, here it's Pacto Global in Brazil. The ESG work for Swedish industry and all of us in Team Sweden is very important. So in the next slide, there might be this delay here. I think we had the committees, which we can go on.
Yeah.
And I would finally like to talk a bit about the publications. The book, here it is, publications. Since we have a magazine, we have a business climate survey, very important to mention. Andreas mentioned it, that every year we do together with the embassy and Business Sweden a survey about Swedish companies in Brazil. This is a global survey nowadays with 22 countries participating. And we had 50 companies here in Brazil. So if you're interested to know the results, they are on our website. A very clear report on the business climate. It was in March and April this year we did it. So it was about last year and how companies see about the coming 12 months. Very interesting reading, inspiring reading. And Andreas mentioned many of the facts already, but I encourage you to read the Business Climate Survey. And then the book, since we're celebrating 70 years, we published this book, as you can see on the slide, Sweden in Brazil, with many symbols about the Swedish presence in here. And that's also on our website, and that shows the strength of Sweden and Brazil. We have 40 companies in the book, everything from the first ones coming in, ABB, Ericsson and AGA, SKF, more than 100 years ago, to the new ones. Olle Widén will soon talk about Finansera, which is one example of a company that has arrived recently. So it's really a fantastic story. When you talk about Brazil, you tend to talk about the challenges, right? But this story of Swedish companies in Brazil is proof that it's possible to do business here. The Swedish companies are here to stay. It's been a roller coaster, often up and down, but the companies who come, they are here with long-term commitments. And as I said, there are many success stories. So this is what we're here to talk about and to inspire other companies and to learn from each other. Better to learn from others' mistakes than making them yourself. So that is what we're here to do. And I think I also added here on social media that you can follow all of us on social media, of course, nowadays. After the pandemic, we have gone more digital than before. So any questions or more information can be found on our social media channels and the YouTube site, of course. So this is just an introduction. We will soon get into the panel debate, and there's so much to say about Brazil. And thank you again for being here. And I'm passing on to the next speaker, I think, who is Johan Fager, right, Louise?
Yeah, exactly. Thank you so much, Jonas. And now let's dig into some very important practicalities, because Brazil is a market very different from the Swedish one. And to help us with this, we have Johan Fager from Casamax, who has lived and worked in Brazil for over 24 years and participated in the establishment of more than 30 subsidiaries. Welcome up, Johan.
Well, thank you, Louise, and thank you very much for inviting me. It's a pleasure to be here to get today with all of you. First of all, then I'm Johan. I've been here in Brazil for many years now. Been working as leaders for leading positions in several Swedish companies. Worked as a consultant. I worked for the Swedish Chamber of Commerce many years back. But I think 15 years ago, I founded Casamax, which is kind of based on all the experience I have from all of these years in doing business and operationalizing business and getting the results. So that's basically what Casamax is all about. It's helping companies to do business in Brazil in an easy way. And that means that we take care of all the back office stuff, the administration. We do finance, HR things. We take care of import, logistics. We take care of sales support things. So we do everything that is not core business. or the boring things, as some people call it. And that's basically what we do. But I'd like to share with you today 3 things. There are many things to share, but 3 things I picked up over the years that I see that I think are important for Swedish companies wanting to do business in Brazil. Things that are obvious, but that people and companies do wrong, right? And I see it over and over. Even if they are obvious, I see these things happening. So I'll have only 3 slides and I go through them, and with that context, so to say. So the first one is what Andreas also mentioned, is what we call the custo Brasil, or the Brazil cost, which is kind of an aggregation of several things. It's not only the costs that are high, it's only the administration, the bureaucracy, and everything all around that makes Brazil a complicated country to operate in. So if you see here on the slide, I put up some very simplistic graphs. So the first one is ease of doing business. This is a ranking done by the international ranking on how easy it is to do business. And so Sweden is doing pretty good. Brazil is worst in class, right? One of the worst countries in the world. So it's difficult to start a company. It's difficult to get the licenses. It's hard to take care of the taxes. It's hard. It's kind of complicated to do everything that you need to do to run your business, right? So it's important to remember this. It's also important to remember, which is part of the cost of Brazil, the central bank interest rate. Today, people complain in Sweden about the interest rate, that they are so high and people are, having difficulty in paying their mortgages and so forth. In Brazil today, we're in 13.25%, and that interest rate has gone down. We hope it's going to go down a little bit further, but it's a whole different level, right? So the cost of financing for companies in Brazil is hard, right? It's hard to be competitive. The cost of capital is very high. On the other side, it's a big competitive advantage if you know how to play the game, right? And a third thing that you might have heard before is how much time you spend on taxes. The tax system is maybe the most complex in the world, right? So Brazil is very complicated. It's very easy to do the wrong things, and this is just a number of, to illustrate this, the time that a normal sized company, I'm not sure what kind of a company it was, but it's a mid-sized company, that they compare many different countries and see how much time you spend on taxes. And in Sweden, you spend roughly 122 hours per year on taxes. In Brazil, you spend 1,500 hours for the same kind of company. So it's more than 10 times as much time, which means that, hey, if you have a part-time person in Sweden working on taxes, maybe you need 4 or 5 persons in Brazil for a similar company. So it illustrates how the cost, but it also illustrates the complexity of the tax system. And apart from that, there's some other things with registrations. There's some central bank things that you have to think about, permits, HR regulations. There's a lot of complications. This is the cost Brazil. I don't want to state that there is a problem with all of this. There is also an opportunity in all of this, because if you do the right thing, and not everybody do the right thing, you do get a competitive advantage out of all of this. You can actually, if you manage the system in the right way, you can be very, very competitive, and that's important to remember. But I think the most important takeaway from this: don't do it yourself, right? I see many companies coming down here and think, hey, I operate in many other companies, in many other countries. We can operate in Brazil as well with the same setup. It doesn't work like that. You need to get a professional support. You need to have a very good lawyer to start with. You need to have a very good accountant. Don't go with any accountant. Don't go with any lawyer. So you need good professional support in order to be successful. So that's, I think, the key takeaway number 1. So if you go over to slide number 2, which is another thing I learned over the years, it's about looking at your business model, right? And having the right business model when you set up your business. So this slide is based on what a small study we did for a company not very long ago, when they couldn't understand why they were not selling very much in Brazil. So if you look at the first case, which is end customer in Brazil importing directly, he had some customers in Brazil. They were importing some, but not very much. And he said, hey, I want to change this. The market is very good. He got a distributor. He changed the distributor, got a new distributor, and he couldn't sell. And the distributor was saying the prices are too high. And he said, hey, I have the same prices as my international competitors all over the world, right? So why don't I sell? So we made the simulation considering the same reasonable margins that the Swedish company had, the same margin and so forth, and the end customer price comes up to be some 20% higher compared to if the company imports by themselves. So there you have a dilemma, right? If you don't have a distributor, you don't have distribution and you don't sell. If you have a distributor, you get a high price that is too high, right? And then we started to compare to a couple of their competitors. And we looked at one competitor with a local setup that took advantage of the advantage you can get in terms of freight, consolidating shipments, in terms of transfer pricings and so forth. And without decreasing their margin, they were able to decrease the sales price by some 16%. So, and the last case on the way to the right is if the same company, and there's another company in the market taking advantage of tax advantages, and there are several tax advantages. There's a tax war going on between different states and so forth, which might change with the new tax reform that is under discussion, but this is still valid and will probably be valid for several years. Yes. So if you take advantage of this, all of these tax advantages as well, you have a totally different sales price to the market. So when the sales manager in Sweden saw this, I said, okay, now I understand why I don't sell, right? And you can find the same kind of situation for all kinds of products and imported products, but you also see the same kind of situation for service companies, where the setup and how you model your business is extremely important in order to be successful. So do keep that in mind, right? There are reasons why if you're not selling, there are probably good reasons why you're not selling. And the third thing, if you change slide again, please, is a little bit more on the communication side, but you have to be present. And you have to be present in several ways. If I see people coming down and doing business visits, they go and meet some companies and say, hey, I had great visits. It was so good. We're going to do good here in Brazil. And then they go back and nothing happens again, right? There was a very positive first meeting, but in Brazil, you need to be present physically. You have to go and visit your clients. You cannot only do it by email and Teams meetings and so forth. You have to be there. People like to be, have a coffee together. They like to have a lunch together. They like to hug each other, like the bears here on the picture. So it's a lot of a physical contact that is needed, and people like to do business with people that they like. So if you're not there and if you're not a likable person, you're not on the radar when it comes to making the purchasing decision. So be present, come and visit from Sweden. If you want to be even more present, which is good, make sure that you have local sales. It is a lot easier for a Brazilian to take the phone and call somebody here in Brazil, and you can meet and you can talk. And without the local sales contact, it's often hard to get the right results, right? Much more here than maybe in Sweden. People negotiate with people and not with companies. So having the personal contact is extremely important. And last but not least, if you want to be really successful, I would recommend that you look into setting up a subsidiary and taking advantage of all the advantages that are here to take, right? See that mid-sized companies coming down here, when they do set up a business and start running it with more attention, that's when the business starts picking up, right? Ole might be able to tell more about that, but many businesses is very hard to run from abroad. Even if it's a service business, it's probably impossible, like the one that Ole is into. But if you work with products and selling products, it's very hard to do good business unless you're local. Especially if your competitors are local, you're going to be in a very tough competitive situation. So I think these are the three things I wanted to highlight, and I think they describe a little bit what happens in Brazil and what you need to do to be successful. And don't hesitate to contact us again if you have any more questions around this.
Thank you very much. And now I would welcome Ole Widén, who founded FinanceZero, which is the latest online marketplace for consumer credit in Brazil, with more than 70 bank partners and 40 million credit applications received. Welcome, Ole.
Thank you. Thank you for the invitation. Very happy to be here. I should wait for the slides. But yeah, my name is Ole. I've been here since 2010, so completing 13 years. I think we have the delay there. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you.
Okay, great. Yeah, I've been living in Brazil since 2010, all the time in Sao Paulo. I moved here, I transferred over with Bloomberg. I worked in London previously. So it helped a lot with the so-called personal red tape and all the complications of moving to Brazil. It's much easier if you're transferring with a company that helps you with that. But pretty much from maybe not year one, but at least year two, I knew that I wanted to start something on my own and build something up from zero. It took a few years looking at a few different projects. But in 2015, I met my current co-founders of FinanceZero, and we founded the company then in 2016. During 2015, we did a lot of market research. I already had a pretty good network from Bloomberg and from living a few years in Brazil. We were looking, then the business model of FinanceZero is similar to Money Supermarket in the UK or Lendo in Sweden, that a lot of people from Sweden probably are familiar with. We saw the level of the digital level with the banks were at the time, 2015, 2016, quite behind Sweden. So we saw that opportunity of having a marketplace, and the idea is to, the banks would only pay for customers they send an offer to, and they actually give credit to, and from the client point of view, it's completely free of charge. That's the business model, but it depended a lot on having a digital product, of course. And at the time, then in 2016, it was a lot sending Excel sheets, etc. So our job was to help the banks and the other fintechs and financieras, that they call them, mid-sized banks, become more digital and work with so-called API integrations, like real-time solutions. And as you mentioned, today we managed to reach that market position, a leading market, being the number one in the Brazilian market. You can change the slide, please.
Yeah, slide is changed.
I recognize a lot that Jonas, Andreas, and Johan mentioned with red tape and the cost of Brazil. It's been a lot of hurdles in the beginning, and But once you establish yourself and once you have your company up and running, of course, it helps a lot with competition and being in there in the fight. And in the first year, a lot of sleepless nights and a lot of frustration for sure. But then it's not for beginners, as everyone says. Once you reach the point that you launch your product and you have your first customers and you've proven your business model, then it's so much more rewarding. And of course, why are we here, or why are our product is working and why we have our investors behind it is because of the size of the market. And Financiero today, we have approximately 1 million new applications per month. We look a lot, of course, on the digital metrics, and one thing that we use a lot and that we look at is Google, and they have different segments, and we see people searching on different brands. We are the number one brand among fintechs looking, when customer or clients looking for credit on Google. We have 4 of the 5 big banks in front of us, but we're number 5 in the market. We are 65 employees today. It's been a roller coaster ride. Especially the last 18 months or so, a lot of political instability before that, economical instability, pandemic, of course, and now with the so-called tech winter, a lot of those reasons for the roller coasters are global, but a lot of also are more related directly to Brazil. But right now we're 65 employees. We were up towards 90 employees before, and then adjusted the team a bit. It's been great. I'm the only co-founder living here in Brazil, and the other co-founders are based in Stockholm and come and visit frequently, especially the team from Webrock. We have 80 bank partners or lending partners connected, 20 plus fintechs, so they are more digital, and then 3 of the 5 big banks, and some of the mid-size banks are filling up that, or a lot of the mid-size and small banks that see the opportunity with what's happening, in Brazil, the extreme digital development and evolution that happened since we started the company, and we can help a lot of the very offline banks become, have a presence online. And I talked a bit about the business model that we have, but it's really like trying to empower Brazilians and have a place where they can compare interest rates. We have a market with, as mentioned, central bank interest rates of 13.25. There are high interest rates. There's a lot of gain in finding the right credit provider. We're trying to help with that and trying to help as many products as possible as well. Right now we have 7-8 different credit products on the platform. But that's a bit of my background and how Financiero is these close to 8 years since we founded the company.
Yeah, thank you so much, Ole. And now I think that we have the background and information to start moving into some questions and hopefully get a little panel discussion the last 20 minutes. So first of all, I'd like to ask, as you mentioned, Johan, in Brazil, it's a lot about being present. You have to meet the people physically. And I would just like to ask the 4 experts about any cultural differences and business norms between Sweden and Brazil. Is there any common mistake that Swedish companies tend to make? And can you maybe agree on 2 to 3 main differences that Swedish companies must consider and adhere to when they first go to Brazil? And feel free to unmute whoever wants to start with the question.
I think you're muted, Andreas.
How about you, Ole? Do you have like...
Maybe when Andreas gets his sound back. But I think one of the things I mentioned in my short speech about the importance of being present and the importance of being local and having this close contact with the people. Brazilians are they're Latin people. They like to talk, they like to interact, they like to be close to each other. And sometimes, even now in this digital world, we forget that, it's very important to be there close to everybody. So I think that's one big thing. And another thing that is important is the hierarchy. And we are, as Swedes, we're not very used to hierarchy and how to operate it. We talk to somebody, we agree with somebody, and we think that's often enough. In Brazil, you agree with somebody, you talk to somebody, but you kind of have to play the whole ladder up and down, from the guy on the floor, on the factory floor, to the project manager, to the to the managing director of the company, so to get the decisions through, right? And being more hierarchical, the decisions might take some more time than you normally see in Sweden. That's it.
And you never get a no, right, Johan, as well, if you do business.
That's right.
It's never no, it's always yes, until you need to sign the contract or something like that, and then wasn't actually 100% yes. But yes. I think what Johan said, it's interesting as well, the hierarchy and so on. For me, building a startup and really trying to promote the Scandinavian or the Swedish way of having a very flat organization, there's also a lot of opportunity in that, because I agree 100% with you on that there is that hierarchy and people are used to it. But if you build a business and kind of have it as flat as possible, it could be something simple like just having a beer with everyone after work and be just available in a different way that maybe Brazilian executives might not be, but also in the decision making and we are 65 employees and we have a leadership group every Monday morning with 22 people. Everyone that is having someone under them as some kind of team leader or manager or director position are in that discussion. Some decisions you have to keep outside, but I think that's an opportunity as well with this, with the way a lot of companies are set up in Brazil.
Would you say that this...
That's very much my experience too. Sorry, just adding, Louise, that Brazilians really appreciate the Swedish model in many senses, and also in the flat organizations. And we notice here that it's very common that people change when they leave a Swedish company. They're going to another Swedish company. So if you're inside the Swedish ecosystem, it's really hard going back to a different business culture. And the Brazilians really appreciate the way we work in Sweden. And maybe we should talk about Brand Sweden a little bit too. I forgot to mention that in my introduction, that Brand Sweden is very much evaluated here in Brazil. If you say that you come from Sweden, the Brazilians really open the doors and they want to know more. So the Swedish values, the Swedish culture is a door opener here for sure, not only in terms of business culture.
And now that we're talking about
definitely
Brand Sweden already, we got a question about sustainability. And there's been a lot of talk about sustainability being a big factor of collaboration between Sweden and Brazil, that there's a lot of common interests there. What are your views on that? Is it something that you've seen already in Brazil? Do you think it could be a good potential future collaboration?
I can make a sound check here. You hear me now?
We hear you.
Yes.
Good. Well, as I did the sound check, I'll take the lead on this one then to start with. It's a big question. It's a broad area, as we all know. It's a definition. What is sustainability? But what we can see, and what I don't think is conveyed always back in media to at least European media and probably global media, is that there is a big shift and a bigger responsibility. From Brazilian side, we have to remember still that there are other challenges that Brazil is also facing, and they are coming out fairly well in the overall sustainability with the green matrix that they have and so on. So they are already checking off a lot of areas in terms of being the resourcefulness country with a green profile. But that still said, if you look at the larger corporates, of course, Brazilian is on to the whole decarbonization strategies, the whole green transition. So if you go to the big mining companies, the big automotive companies, they are making the shift now, and they are of course looking for partnership, like we all do all over the world, and that's where Sweden can really contribute with innovative solutions and best practices as well. So it's big question, but it's a move, and it's also, of course, a big political discussions around this. Then you can bridge that over to the whole EU-Mercosur discussion and what is expected from Brazil from targets. And this is also a little bit on why the maybe discussions have stopped up a bit now, that Brazil is not seeing that Europe in this case, and some member states in Europe are maybe not respecting what Brazil is doing in this field of area. It's a lot of focus on important things, but maybe not always looking at the full picture. A long answer, but it's a complex question.
And that also goes for the client's point of view. Had very good results in the business climate survey this year, where we asked those 50 companies we were talking about if their clients consider environmental aspects of their products and services. And this 3 years ago, only some 20% said it's very, very important for our customers. And that has gone up to 40-45% this year and last year. So the market is already pointing to higher demand of green products and services. And that's very good news for Swedish presence in Brazil, since we are pretty much far ahead of many others.
Is there anything you want to add on this question, or should we move on? We can move on.
Not really.
As touched about in the introduction, there is a trade agreement in the making right now. And obviously we do not know the outcome of it, but I was just wondering if you think the trade agreement, like what would you think the trade agreement would imply for Swedish companies operating in Brazil right now, if and when this trade agreement is signed?
Wow.
Big questions.
Maybe a wow sums it up. I mean, it's. I mean, to start with, it's hard to get this trade agreement through. I mean, it's been a discussion since decades back, right? But if it does come through and it starts goes into operation, it's a huge advantage for Swedish companies when it comes to sending their products here. I think it's over 90% of the products that are exported to Brazil from Sweden should be covered or something like that. So it will have a huge impact for Swedish companies, also for the service companies, also for deregulation in many areas. That's exactly what will come out. I'm not the expert, I don't know, but it will be very, very beneficial. And I think it will be very, very beneficial for Brazilian industry, for Brazilian company as well. If you look at the Brazil cost that I talked about before, with all the import taxes on machines and on services, on software and everything, it becomes expensive for most Brazilian companies to operate. So if you manage to decrease these trade barriers a bit, I think that the Brazilian industry in general will be a lot more competitive, and that will rub off on everything. So I'm sure one of the ones hoping that this trade agreement will come through.
Maybe an other side of that coin. I'm fully agreeing what Johan is saying, and it's complex. And I've seen, there's a lot of calculations on this, and some estimation is 90% of all the import taxes will go away with this, and it's a game changer but the game changer for the companies that are not here, I would say, and that's the other side of the coin in a way, that the old model for Brazil has been actually to manufacture in Brazil, to win Brazil. And that's where we see all the larger Swedish companies that has been here for 100 years or less, but many years, they have set up their business model that way. And we talked about this with business models, how important it is to make the full analysis. And here you have another parameter that you need to add on to it if you're entering Brazil at this moment. What model should you apply? What will happen with the EU trade agreement? And how fast can it be implemented? Even if it's implemented fast, it will still take 5-10 years before a full implementation, because it will come in stages. So, but maybe you want to position yourself early. But then going back to the fact that many has invested in Brazil, when we also talk to these companies that are heavily invested here, of course, they see that they could maybe make more global production in Brazil for other markets. So they, of course, would benefit from an export perspective from Brazil as well. But it's easy to just look one way in this agreement sometimes, but also think about the installed basis of Sweden in Brazil and how that will impact. But in what we hear and what we see is that the Swedish community, if we generalize that, is definitely in favor for this, and it is a game changer if it comes through for the new entry companies to Brazil.
And if the agreement does come through, do you think that there's going to be a change of sectors of importance between Brazil and Sweden? Is there any sector that's going to be extra easy to navigate in, or do you think it's going to the trade between Sweden and Brazil is going to revolve around similar sectors that we see today?
Well, I think it will have impact of all, and as we say, it's a rollout that will come in phases, and that's also one of the question of how will it be rolled out, and will there be favorizing some sectors in the beginning according to the agreement, of course, between the parties. But I think over the general answer, it will impact all. Then it rather comes down to which sectors do we see for the future that Brazil and Sweden can continue growing. And then you have the green transition again that we talked about. I think the whole sustainability sector, the new materials with also the battery, the energy storage. So the energy sector, the mining sector, the automotive will continue to be big here in Brazil, because that's how the structure is built in Brazil today on how you transport things. So I would mention those three as the three main ones.
Yeah, thank
I
you.
can add energy sector. Totally also agreeing with Andreas. And again, about energy, the energy sector. Brazil is a role model in terms of renewable energy, right? When you read about Brazil, again, in European media, you only read about the challenges and the problems. But Brazil is doing fantastic work in terms of energy, and here we see a lot of possibilities for not only Sweden but for European investments in the coming years, independently of the trade agreement. Actually, this is an area where we will see a lot of things happening in the coming years.
That's great. And lastly, I think we have time for one more question. We got a question about language barriers. When you start operating in Brazil as a Swedish company, either as a startup, Olle, or an existing company, is it necessary to have Brazilian staff in your company for ease of doing business? Or is it the norm that most people are fluent in English and that business transactions still happen in English?
No, from our point of view, it's mostly Portuguese, for sure. Mostly, I mean, we have a lot of partners, but on the bank side, most meetings and everything from day one been in Portuguese. Then we have the fintech side that some people come, international fintechs come to establish themselves in Brazil. There's more common to have English, but within my team, as I say, I'm the only gringo here. We have 7-8 people with English, and the rest is just in Portuguese. I guess that's a pretty good reflection. But we are in the consumer credit market. It's definitely it's no international finance and so on. It's very important to have a Brazilian team or Portuguese speaking team.
Yeah. Does anyone want to add to that question?
I think that's pretty general what Olle said. And if in a new economy like fintech, if it's important with Portuguese, imagine the old, more traditional industries. I think that's even more important to be able to talk and do business in Portuguese. But when you come, so I think that's goes for everything. But when you're coming down and visit Brazil, if you come down as a Swedish businessman, you can often conduct a business meeting in English, depending on who you talk to and so forth. That's normally possible. The level might not be 100%, but normally you can get around pretty well in most places. When you go down to the shop floor, it might be more difficult though.
Understandable. So lastly, I guess to sum up this interesting hour, one could say that Brazil is a very important market, both right now and also in the future for Swedish companies. There's a lot of opportunities, but then on the other side, there's also some hurdles to overcome, the language barrier being one of them. So it could be important to take up some Portuguese classes. And with those words, I will just give a last big thanks to our 4 experts who managed to get up this early in the morning to give us this insightful hour about Brazil and the future of Sweden and Brazilian trades. Thank you so much. And thanks to all listeners.
Thank you.
Thank you, Louise.
Bye-bye.
Thank you very much.
Bye.
Thank you all.
Thank you.
Welcome to Brazil, everybody.
Yes.
Bem-vindos.